Hey guys, this is Warren from Powding Journal, and welcome back to another movie review. This time we are going to be talking about the latest MCU movie, and that is Thunderbolts. This movie caps off a fairly contentious Phase 5 for this cinematic universe, and I think this is pretty much as good of an ending as you could have hoped for. It started off with Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania a couple of years ago, and there have been some really, like I said, contentious releases in the last two and a half years, and the quality has been very much up and down, and there's just been so much drama behind the scenes as well. But all the same, given just everything that's happening, I think that Thunderbolts is pretty much the perfect end movie you could have hoped for without there being an actual Avengers movie, to cap off a phase, which is kind of like what we had with some of the previous phases. You would get a bunch of individual movies and they'd all lead into one Avengers movie or two Avengers movie, as it turned out with Phase 3, with Infinity War and Endgame. Now, here's the thing about Thunderbolts. Most of these are characters you're never going to have heard of. If you've skipped out on some of the movies from like the last 4 years, maybe 5 years even, you don't know who any of these guys are. You don't know who John Walker is. You have no idea who Red Guardian is. You don't know who Yelena Voleva. Yeah, yeah, I think that's her name. You don't know who she is. You don't know, possibly even, you don't know who Ghost is. And, that is an issue. You don't even know who the Taskmaster is. And that has certainly been a very, interesting thing to see come about. But it has been built over, like, so many different movies, even some television shows, which is something I really wasn't expecting. And, you know, the problem with the Marvel Cinematic Universe has always been, for like the last, I would say, about 2013. So that'd be like, yeah, 12 years, maybe 13 years. The problem is their television offerings have been some of the, you know, least popular of material that has come out, which is not, a particular like knock against the MCU. I loved some of the Agents of Shield stuff. I loved some of episodes of WandaVision, but stuff like what was it? Secret Invasion and Captain America and the Winter Soldier, they didn't work out for me. I tried to watch Agatha all along, but I think I made it like 2 episodes, 3 episodes into it. Just wasn't my thing. Mostly because of, I didn't really like WandaVision all that much, and that led into a movie which reset all of Scarlet Witch's character development from the show, and there was just all that. But you know, I do have to say that I think this collection of characters that we can see on the screen right now within the poster, at the top you have John Walker, you have Ghost, you have the Red Guardian, you have Bucky, you have Yelena, you have the Taskmaster, and you have this weird guy called Bob. Bob, that's his name. Bob. Could be Robert, could be Bobby, but it's pretty much just Bob for most of the film. And that's like, that was an interesting joke, and I thought there might be something more to it. But I was like, I'll just look it up sometime later. And then I was randomly browsing Instagram the other night, and I finally saw something which was like, okay, here's the reference that they were going for, which is the actor, Lewis Pullman, Bob. He plays a character called Bob in not Mission Impossible, Top Gun Maverick. He is the backseater for one of the pilots in the movie, and his call sign is just Bob. And I was like, wow, nice reference there. Um, Pretty good stuff. You know, it wasn't. It promised you something. There was something there going on that it wasn't just an off joke or whatever. But I'm glad that that's what the reference was. And it's like, okay, so this guy they kind of play. There's similar characters from in Top Gun Maverick and in this movie, but there's clearly something there. And then in this movie, of course, Liz Pullman, he gets to do a lot of stuff that I felt was really neat. He's a fantastic actor. He's the son of Bill Pullman, who most people probably remember as the president from Independence Day and Independence Day 2. So, pretty good stuff. And I think, Stu, let's kick off the review. And I'm just going to say this right now. This is going to be a spoiler filled review. Spoiler filled. So please just keep that in mind. I'll start off with some non spoilery stuff, but it's going to cover some of the previous material that's come out with these characters, and we're just going to focus on that. And then, I'm going to move into, the actual story of the movie, which I think we should definitely talk about. Now, to start off with, all these characters, they're coming in from different movies, different shows, and this is the one where, they all get together. Now, the problem with this whole thing is that, John Walker, we first see him in Captain America Winter Soldier. He's the new mandated Captain America after Steve dies in Endgame. Ghost, played by the amazing uh, Hannah John Kamen, wonderful actress. We first saw her in Ant-Man 2, which was a really good movie, I feel, and it's really great to see more of her now. Bucky, he's been there for like I don't know, for almost like 15 years now, I think. Red Guardian, he shows up in Black Widow. Yelena, she shows up in Black Widow. Taskmaster shows up in Black Widow. And Bob. He's the new guy. And yeah, I mean, spoiler. He is the Sentry. All right? He is the Sentry. I'm not familiar with the Sentry too much. So his character was something I had some difficulty relating to because I know literally nothing about the guy. I read some comics about, like I said, 12, 13 years ago, I read some comics. That was when I was deep into, the whole comics world. I was reading a lot of stuff, reviewing a lot of stuff, but I really don't know much, and I've forgotten pretty much everything. All I know is that he's some kind of like, one of the many Marvel versions of Superman in a in some sense. He's like a really powerful character, and he's someone who like if he ever goes off his rocker, he can be like a serious mega threat. But anyways, so we have all these characters coming together. There's some time jumps between the last movie we had, which is Captain America: Brave New World, which is where we first saw Congressman Bucky Barnes, and there's some lead up in from that movie, and there's just so much more stuff that's happening here, right? Because the character of Julia Louis Dreyfus, she's the director of the CIA in this world of the MCU, and now she's being impeached, and there's a committee set up to investigate everything she's been doing and what she's actually been doing most recently apart from everything we saw for in like Black Panther Wakanda Forever, you know what she's been doing recently is cleaning up her act, which is to say that she's destroying evidence. She's been using a lot of these guys like Yelena, the Taskmaster, John Walker, and Ghost to get rid of stuff. And now once she's like, oh yeah, I'm pretty much comfortable where I am, she just wants them all to kill each other. So she sets up all of them in an ambush together where they have to kill the other person, and that just kickstarts the whole journey. Now, so that's like the major, the beat of the opening first half, or even the first act of the movie, and I think it was pretty good. I believe that the entire half of the movie, like before the intermission, is a much stronger movie than the second half, and I think that's because we are meeting a lot of these characters together for the first time. They haven't really interacted with each other before this, and you know, there's been so much bad blood between them here and there, family problems, just like, uh, not able to get to work together in the case of Bucky and John Walker. And I think that was like, really good the way that they set all this up. And, they give each character, in each major act of the movie, there's a place for each character where we, learn more about them, but also progressing the story. I felt that something like that is really tough to pull off, but they managed to do it really well here, pretty much as good as they did it in the first Avengers movie, which is like, way back when, 2011 or 12 or whatever. That was, what a journey. And they made us care about these characters. I am invested in what, the person struggles are for each of these characters. Although I feel that Ghost got the short end of the stick there. We don't really learn too much about her, but I'm also okay with that because she was the villain for a whole entire movie that was centered around her and her struggles and just how she came to be in her origin story and all that. I thought that was fantastic stuff. The second half, though, this is a movie that tried to deal with mental health issues. It's dealing with depression, possibly some kind of post-traumatic stress, and that harkens back to what we saw in Iron Man 3 with Tony Stark, and how he was struggling with everything that happened during the Battle of New York, almost dying then, and his insecurities with the people around him, and not just Pepper, but also his best friend, Happy, and also with Peter Parker, and just where he sees his place within the Avengers, as you saw in Age of Ultron. You know that a lot of that is reflected in these characters with their struggle, because their struggles, you know, they are it's such a big melting pot, right? Because previously we only saw that kind of stuff with Tony Stark, we saw that kind of stuff with Scarlet Witch, Wanda, and not really with any of the other characters, I feel. Although, maybe a little bit with, the different Wakandans in Wakanda Forever. But it's something that the MCU tries to avoid. And probably a good reason, because if you just sprinkle it everywhere, then it loses the narrative heft and the importance that it could have. So that was something that was done really well in the movie. But I thought that in the second half they made a switch and they focused a little bit too much into that. And already this is a movie where you know how the story is going to work out. From the first time we meet Bob, they try to drop hints that who is he, who is he, who is he, but you pretty much know who he's going to be. And you know there's going to be some kind of like there this is a team that is working together out of necessity, not by choice. They're going to struggle with each other's egos, with each other's personalities, and there has to be some kind of like consolidation moment in the second half towards the climax. We're like, okay, we are a team that's going to work together. And it was expected, it was by the numbers, but I felt that the second half wasn't too strong all the same, because it felt like the story didn't want to work really towards the finish. Like I said, it was pretty obvious how it was going to go down, and it was kind of obvious, I suppose, how they were going to take down the big bad of the movie, which is the Sentry. And I felt that there could have been so much more. There could have been some kind of a twist to the story that just takes you in a different direction that you're not expecting, and then tries to bring you back to the main story. But that kind of a swerve didn't happen, and I was expecting that, because it was like, okay, this is becoming way too obvious. And Bucky is like, to take a small aspect of that. Bucky is a guy who's like, trying to change his life. He's no longer the Winter Soldier. He's no longer on the run. He's trying to make a life for himself within the climate that is in the U.S. As we saw in Captain America: Winter Soldier, as we saw in Captain America: Brave New World. But he's clearly struggling, and how he tried to resolve that, he probably has one of the best action scenes in the entire movie, which I thought was certainly well deserved. But at no point did I feel like, oh, so that's taking away from all these other amazing characters like Yelena, it's taking away from Ghost, and just, the sheer absurdity of a character like the Red Guardian, played by David Harbour, who's like, at his absolute best. Absolute best. So, I was like, okay, so this is becoming way too obvious. There has to be a swerve. There has to be a swerve. And there never really is. Like, the best you could say is that, there's a shift in who the villain is from the character of Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, Julia Louis Dreyfus' character, the CIA director, from her to the Sentry. But that was obvious. like if you have the Sentry in a story like this, there's mental health issues involved, there's trauma involved, there's stress involved like that, struggling with your identity, struggling with your place in the world, and all that. It's like, yeah, that's all going to get resolved. They're all going to come together and just problem solve it as a group and everything. It's like, where's where's the punch? This is all too by the numbers, which is why like I love the first half because we're constantly seeing all these characters develop and the journey is starting. But it's like, okay, so they'll start to lose out steam in the second half, and I felt like the ultimate ending, it didn't quite work for me. It felt like they were like it was a bit too tongue in cheek and completely like appends the main plot in the first act. It's like, yeah. I'm not gonna spoil what that is, but it's like, yeah, the movie could have been a whole lot better in the second half. However, just visually speaking, amazing action scenes, like I've said, especially in the second act. Uh, we kick off the movie in a really strong visual themes, where we see how these characters are all struggling with their own trauma, especially Yelena, who's like our main focal point for the movie, because we see that she's lost her mother, she's lost her sister twice now, and there's just something going on there. And you know we saw some parts of her from like Black Widow, Hawkeye the show, but this is really where she comes into her own. I was like, okay, so she could be a really good, like a leader character for the group and everything. But, again, she does really good, amazing action scenes. John Walker, he's like, everything about him is just like, perfect because he's the asshole of the group. You know, he talks down to everybody. He has his own inflated self importance thing going on, and he doesn't really listen to anyone else. And bringing all that visually together with all these other characters, like okay, so they're all like dressed in these dark colors, these faded colors. You know, like you can see they're mostly in black with some white sprinkled through, with some dirty whites, dirty reds, and all that. And Red Guardian, he represents this like old view of Russia, and but bombastic, egocentric, but just like he is self-aware, and all that comes together really well. And that contrasts again, I guess, with the visual themes of its main villain, the Sentry, which I thought was the absolute weakest point of the movie. They could have done so much more, and none of it really felt, you know none of it really made sense to me. Like, why did they go that route with a villain, with when Bob turns into, the evil Sentry? Like, what is actually going on here? Because everything is dark already. There's a dark filter, and then you have all these dark animations going on all over the place, and it's like, okay, so I kind of get what you're going for visually, but this isn't translating well because it's just empty, right? Like, I guess we are trying to, evocate on what the characters are feeling, like Yelena, Bob, and even, John Walker, who is struggling with himself, what they are feeling deep down, and, dealing with that stress and that depression, is a big theme. But it's like, I think it could have been less on the nose. But yeah, other than that, I think, the story loses, some steam in the second half, and it doesn't really, mesh well with the first half. And overall, visually great, cinematography great, some really good stunts and everything. Like I said, they kick off with Yelena doing a jump off like the second tallest building in the world, which is like that's a stunt that Florence Pugh, the actress herself, she did it herself, with some assist from the crew, with the stunt team and stuff, but she did it herself, and that was like, damn, like that's some like Tom Cruise level of insanity right there. But really good stuff. I really like that they're bringing these characters more to the front because, especially like Bucky, Yelena, and Ghost, I think they especially deserve it. And you can never really have enough of John Walker. He is like such a great counterpoint to so many different characters, whether it's Captain America, it's a Winter Soldier with Black Widow and all the other members of the team. It's like, really good stuff. But like I said, it wasn't as strong a film as I thought it was going to be, but it is a better film than I was expecting because, I after experience with, Phase 5, I was like, man, my love for the MCU is just like, kind of winding down. Like, what even was like the last best movie for Phase 5? Probably the Marvels. Like, you could Wikipedia counts Deadpool and Wolverine as being part of Phase 5. I don't really, but overall, those are really like the only two good movies in Phase 5 because Quantumania was bad, like absolutely freaking terrible bad. And, Brave New World, so disappointing. And actually, let me check what the other movies were. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I've not seen that one. And that's pretty much it. Six movies in this phase. And it's like, yeah, I'm glad Phase 5 is over. Phase 6 is going to start in a few months when Fantastic Four comes out. And then it's Avengers Doomsday next year, which is certainly going to be a trip. Fantastic Four looks set to be pretty amazing, and Doomsday is, well, it's going to be Doomsday. You know, People have already talked so much about all the special stuff that's happening in Doomsday, so we'll see what that happens. But anyways, so the movie ends. It's a fairly decent, upbeat ending for what is, you know, quite a dark movie at times. But then we get to the post-credit scene, and the first one is like it's the joke scene, right? It is all good, but the second scene, and again, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. It's set 14 months after the events of this movie, which is like, uh, okay, so that's a huge jump. And there are some things that happen which I'm like, it's kind of cringe. And, I don't really get the point of the time jump that they're going for. It's like, what are you even trying to do here? Like, you're already in real time, right? So, what's going on? Because, whenever they do these time jump thingies, it always seems really weird. Like, they did it for going from Infinity War to Endgame, and that was, certainly a trip. And now they're doing it again, going from the end of one phase to the start of another phase. And I'm like, okay, but it ties into some future projects, and as it always does. And it was kind of neat, but also kind of cringe, and you know, carries over some threads from Captain America: Brave New World. But I think overall the MCU is kind of losing its way. It's become too spread out. Like the next Spider-Man movie isn't going to be for like another couple of years, I think. I'm looking at Phase 6 right now, and so it's Fantastic Four this year, Avengers Doomsday next year, and then, oh, I'm sorry, Spider-Man Brand New Day next year as well. And then it's a Secret Wars in 2 years. It's like, oh my God, that's like just like four movies in Phase 5. Doesn't quite make sense to me, but I'm sure they have something up their sleeves. But I think they need to go back to, building up a trilogy again for some of the characters. Like Captain Marvel, she's had two movies. We need a third one. Spider-Man is doing really well. Another Thor series would be really good. But I wouldn't mind having another movie with the Thunderbolts. I think there's so much untapped potential with these guys and girls, and the way that this movie ends, it kind of negates the possibility that we'll get another Thunderbolts movie down the line. But I think that should happen because this is a team that really deserves some spotlight. Because in the comics, the Thunderbolts have been, they've been such an important factor within the larger Marvel Comics verse. And I feel if this is just going to be a one and done, it doesn't serve any of these characters well at all. Irrespective of the fact that a lot of them are going to show up in Doomsday and then probably in Secret Wars down the line in 2 years. But I think there needs to be more of an effort from Marvel, from Kevin Feige, to invest more in these new generation of characters because the original Avengers are gone, and the people remain like Bruce Banner, Thor. They're just like off doing their own thing. They're like out of the running, and we need another team to focus on. So that is something that I believe they should be doing. But anyways, guys, that's gonna be my review for the movie. Uh, not too many spoilers, I would say, except the most obvious stuff here. But I think this is a movie worth watching. I wouldn't say that really about Captain America: Brave New World or Quantumania. Like Quantumania, you can absolutely skip whatever is going on in that movie, none of it matters. Even they've even changed the main villain from that and everything, and that movie was just like god awful. As I said at the start of the video, this is as good an ending as you could have hoped for with this phase. It ends on a really good note. It's a fairly solid movie with some drawbacks, and it's a quite a few steps up from even Brave New World, which is like whoa, you know. And yeah, that's pretty much it from me. There's gonna be, let's see, there's gonna be Fantastic Four in a few months, and there's gonna be Superman, and there's so much stuff coming down the pipeline. This summer is gonna be like incredibly busy, I feel. But anyways, until next time, guys, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out all the other reviews if you can, if you want. Please, I would request that. And I'll see you guys next time. Cheers. Bye. See you all.